Good evening and welcome to the Bible Hour, day number 30. 8 people already here, nice and early. The Bible Hour, where we read the Bible for an hour. And we have just started, well, we haven't, we're about to start the book of Judges. So grab your Bibles. You've got 4 minutes to get a drink, cup of cheese. No, don't do that. Cup of tea. Hello all, lovely day today. Sue Roberts. Yes, it was. The sun was shining. Rita tells me that it's going to be a windy day tomorrow. Hello, Chris Henry. Hello, Chris Williams. Williams, all present and correct. Phil Townlin, good evening. Smart haircut. Thanks, Phil Townlin. I did it myself. I got a few funerals coming up, but I've ended up doing it too short and looking like I'm on the way to Maindee Army Barracks. Not a funeral. Good evening, Park End Admin. Good evening, Howell George. Haven't seen you around for a while. Good to see you. Did you do it with the lawnmower? Thank you very much. Thank you, Diane. Respect. Respect. Oops, spilled that. That haircut and jumper combination, yep. We are off to the army. It is the book of Judges. You think EastEnders was interesting? Let's see what the Old Testament church gets up to. Have you had a Rennie? Can we have a care package sent to Owen since lockdown is running low on hair gel? Hell, George, I'm not getting into that. But I do not use hair gel. Sue Roberts, I did not use a Rennie because when I was growing up, we had something called milk of magnesium. And in my cupboard, I found powder labeled magnesium. So I just took that and it seemed to work. That's assuming milk of magnesium is a derivative of powder magnesium. Howell George is a chemist. He should be able to say, but it seemed to do the trick. Good morning, North Star. All the way from Zeeland Newydd. 2 minutes, and we are starting the book of the Judges. Magnesia in solid form. There we are. We have 1 minute to go. Please grab your Bibles. If you want to know why we ask these questions every single night in the Bible Hour, there's a link below. There is no God in heaven who is unlike Jesus. Jesus is the icon, the express icon of the Father. Bicarbonate of soda would work as well. Good evening, Neil Whittington. Good to see you here. And Sam, maybe. We have 1 minute to go before we begin reading the book of Judges. We are flying through the Bible. Yeah, concern for the pastor or minister. Do you think the Othniel in Judges is the same as the Othniel in Joshua we heard ye day? Let's find out, Hal George. Thanks for the spoiler. But we shall see. Okay, so before we begin, we're into Judges, and I just want to say a few things. Park End admin, don't post it yet, but please dig out 1 Samuel 2 verse 10. So we know Bible Hour Group, and if you're new, welcome on in. The church has just inherited the land, but the problem is they've inherited the physical land, but still something is missing. Jesus, the angel of the Lord, is their king, but they keep wandering away from him. We're going to see it a lot in this book. Then a spiral takes place, and they rebel and they get judged, and then they cry out to the Lord for help, and then God has mercy and raises up a deliverer for them. This book really shows that sin crouches at the door of church. Bible, question mark. Don't know what that question means as such. And it's a pretty tough time to read, actually, because of what the church manages to squander. Good evening, Petit Bois. And on Facebook, I posted today as a little teaser trailer this phrase, which is in all over Judges, particularly chapter 17, 18, 19, 21. There was no king in Israel. Oh, what version? Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter. You choose for this one. I think they all pretty much say the same thing. So this book cries out what the problem is for the church, that they start acting like there's no king over them. And they do what's right in their own eyes. But there were a faithful few people knocking about. And if Park End admin, you choose, but just paste here as we start, because this is key, I think, to the whole Bible, the whole book. 1 Samuel 2 verse 10. Yes, Simon Joseph, you've missed that. You're 5 minutes late. We've done with that abuse and banter. Thank you very much. So yeah, there's a massive problem. This book cries out what that problem is. There was no king over Israel. They've wandered from him. But 1 Samuel 2, author of the book, possibly Samuel. True that, Sue Williams. The rest of us, if we just grab Judges chapter 1, as we follow on from the book of Yeshua, who we lost last night. All right, so I'll start reading Judges chapter 1. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Judah and Simeon conquer the land. After the death of Yeshua, the Israelites asked the Lord which tribe should go first to attack the Canaanites. The Lord answered, Park End admin, 1 Samuel 2 verse 10. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Yeah, perfect. So the church spirals in this book because they pretend like there's no king over them. But Hannah there, who's knocking about at this time, prays to God that his anointed king would be exalted. So do not take your eyes off the king in life, because this book shows you'll spiral. But there were one or two godly, faithful church members with their eyes on the king. Verse 2. The Lord answered, Judah, for I have given them victory over the land. The men of Judah said to their relatives from the tribe of Simeon, join with us to fight against the Canaanites living in the territory allotted to us. Then we will help you conquer your territory. So the men of Simeon went with Judah. When the men of Judah attacked, the Lord gave them victory over the Canaanites and Perizzites, and they killed 10,000 enemy warriors at the town of Bezek. While at Bezek, they encountered King Adoni-Bezek and fought against him, and the Canaanites and Perizzites were defeated. Adoni-Bezek escaped, but the Israelites soon captured him and cut off his thumbs and big toes. Adoni-Bezek said, I once had 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off, eating scraps from under my table. Now God has paid me back for what I did to them. They took him to Jerusalem, and he died there. The men of Judah attacked Jerusalem and captured it, killing all its people and setting the city on fire. Then they went down to fight the Canaanites living in the hill country, the Negev, and the western foothills. Judah marched again against the Canaanites in Hebron, formerly called Kiriath Arba, defeating the forces of Shishai, Ahaman, and Talmai. From there, they went to fight against the people living in the town of Debir, formerly called Kiriath Sephir. Caleb, legend, said, I will give my daughter Achsah in marriage to the one who attacks and captures Kiriath Sephir. Othniel, the son of Caleb's younger brother Kenaz, was the one who conquered it, so Achsah became Othniel's wife. Now, the the Bible Hour will tell you that that is a repeat of something we read yesterday, of the same story. There's Howell Jones's answer, George. When Achsah married Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field. As she got down off her donkey, Caleb asked, What's the matter? She said, Let me have another gift. You have already given me a land in the Negev. Now please give me springs of water too. So Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. When the tribe of Judah left Jericho, the city of palms, the Kenites, who were descendants of Moses' father-in-law, traveled with them into the wilderness of Judah. They settled among the people there, near the town of Arad in the Negev. Then Judah joined Simeon to fight against the Canaanites living in Zaphath, and they completely destroyed the town. So the town was named Hormah. In addition, Judah captured the towns of Gaza, Askelon, and Ekron, along with the surrounding territories. Israel fails to conquer the land. The Lord was with the people of Judah, and they took possession of the hill country. I just remembered one of my favorite verses ever is coming up. But they failed to drive out the people living in the plains who had iron chariots. The town of Hebron was given to Caleb as Moses had promised, and Caleb drove out the people living there who were the descendants of the 3 sons of Anak. The tribe of Benjamin, however, failed to drive out the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem. So to this day, the Jebusites live in Jerusalem among the people of Benjamin. The descendants of Joseph attacked the town of Bethel, and the Lord was with them. They sent men to scout out Bethel, formerly known as Luz. They confronted a man coming out of the town and said to him, Show us a way into the town, and we will have mercy on you. So he showed them a way in, and they killed everyone in the town except that man and his family. Later, the man moved to the land of the Hittites, where he built a town, and he named it Luz, which is its name to this day. The tribe of Manasseh failed to drive out the people living in Beth Shan, Tanakh, Dor, Ibleam, Megiddo, and all their surrounding settlements, because the Canaanites were determined to stay there in that region. When the Israelites grew stronger, they forced the Canaanites to work as slaves, but they never did drive them completely out of the land. If you want to know about why we're driving people out of the land and what they were like for 400 years and why this is divine justice, all of that stuff's put on our YouTube channel. The tribe of Ephraim failed to drive out the Canaanites living in Gezer, so the Canaanites continued to live there among them. The tribe of Zebulun failed to drive out the residents of Kitron and Nahalol, so the Canaanites continued to live among them. But the Canaanites were forced to work as slaves for the people of Zebulun. The tribe of Asher failed to drive out the residents of Akko, Sidon, Alab, Akstib, Heblah, Aphik, and Rehob. Instead, the people of Asher moved in among the Canaanites, who controlled the land, for they failed to drive them out. Likewise, the tribe of Naphtali failed to drive out the residents of Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath. Instead, they moved in among the Canaanites, who controlled the land. Nevertheless, the people of Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath were forced to work as slaves for the people of Naphtali. As for the tribe of Dan, the Amorites forced them back into the hill country and would not let them come down into the plains. The Amorites were determined to stay in Mount Heres, Aijalon, and Shalbim. But when the descendants of Joseph became stronger, the boundary of the Amorites ran from Scorpion Pass to Selah and continued upward from there. If you want to know about the land boundaries and why it's super important, we uploaded a video today about inheriting physical land. And how physical and spiritual joys shouldn't necessarily be wedged apart. Judges chapter 2, verse 1. This is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. The Lord's messenger comes to Bochim. The angel of the Lord, yes, that is the same angel that Jacob called God, who he wrestled with, and all the other people have been saying delivered them out of Egypt and slavery. The angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said to the Israelites, I brought you out of the land into this land. Sorry, misquote my favorite verse ever. I brought you out of Egypt into this land that I swore to give to your ancestors, and I said I would never break my covenant with you. So the Lord again comes out of Gilgal. It's like now his army base where he comes and does his mission stuff for the church. Which is why we said Joshua isn't necessarily like a type of Jesus. Jesus was there with him. There was Yeshua and then the even better Yeshua. For your part, you were not to make any covenants with the people living in this land. Instead, you were to destroy their altars, but you disobeyed my command. Why did you do this? Church, if Jesus gives you a command, do it to the end. So now I declare that I will no longer drive out the people living in your land. They will be thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a constant temptation to you. I will no longer drive out your enemies. So every chunk that said God is driving out the enemies, it's him, the angel. They will be thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a constant temptation to you. When the angel of the Lord finished speaking to all the Israelites, the people wept loudly. So they called the place Bochim, which means weeping. And they offered sacrifices there to the Lord. The death of Yeshua. After Yeshua sent the people away, each of the tribes left to take possession of the land allotted to them. And the Israelites served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Yeshua, and the leaders who outlived him, those who had seen all the great things that the Lord had done for Israel. Yeshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at aged 110. They buried him in the land that he had been allocated in Timnath Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. Israel disobeys the Lord. After that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things he had done for Israel. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. They went after other gods, worshipping the gods of the people around them, and they angered the Lord. They abandoned the Lord to serve Baal and other images of Ashtoreth. This made the Lord burn with anger against Israel, so he handed them over to raiders who stole their possessions. He turned them over to their enemies all around, and they were no longer able to resist them. Every time Israel went out to battle, the Lord fought against them, causing them to be defeated, just as he had warned, and the people were in great distress. The Lord rescues his people. Then the Lord raised up judges to rescue the Israelites from their attackers. Yet Israel did not listen to the judges, but prostituted themselves by worshipping other gods. How quickly they turned away from the path of their ancestors, who had walked in obedience to the Lord's commands. Who said, "The Lord doesn't have grandchildren, only children"? Probably Spurgeon. Spurgeon said everything. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge over Israel, he was with that judge and rescued the people from their enemies throughout the judge's lifetime. For the Lord took pity on his people, who were burdened by oppression and suffering that they had brought on themselves. But when the judge died, the people returned to their corrupt ways, behaving worse than those who had lived before them. They went after other gods, serving and worshipping them, and they refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways. So the Lord burned with anger against Israel. He said, "Because these people have violated my covenant, which I made with their ancestors, have ignored my commands, I will no longer drive out the nations that Yeshua left unconquered when he died. I did this to test Israel, to see whether or not they would follow the ways of the Lord as their ancestors did." That is why the Lord left those nations in place. He did not quickly drive them out or allow Yeshua to conquer them all. Every testing time seems to be a chance to grow or fade away. Judges chapter 3. The nations left in Canaan. These are the nations that the Lord left in the land to test those Israelites who had not experienced the wars of Canaan. He did this to teach warfare to generations of Israelites who had no experience in battle. These are the nations: the Philistines, those living under the 5 Philistine rulers, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites living in the mountains of Lebanon from Mount Baal Hermon to Lebo Hamath. These people were left to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the commands the Lord had given to their ancestors through Moses. So the people of Israel lived among the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and they intermarried with them. Israelite sons married their daughters, and Israelite daughters were given in marriage to their sons, and the Israelites served their gods. Now, on about day 4, we read that the Lord, who promised Abraham the land and his descendants, said, Do not intermarry with pagan people. Their gods will be an oppression and a temptation to you and just destroy you. And looky here. Petit Bois. My question answered as to why the Israelites didn't drive everyone out of the land. Yeah, well, don't think that's automatic, though, like there was some wall blocking them. It was left as a test, and they flunked. Othniel becomes Israel's judge. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. They forgot about the Lord their God, and they served the images of Baal and Asherah poles. As this is past the watershed, Asherah poles were basically massive, giant phallic statues, and he was a god of fertility and sex. It was basically porn. It was basically the internet culture today, just addicted and rising up statues to sex. And one evil king that we're going to see even brought that into the temple and put up a massive, giant, basically, you know what? They even find Asherah poles these days, like in archaeological digs, and it's just giant phallics. It's quite unbelievable. Anyway, why is that in the Bible? Because for the porn addict who's watching, it's nothing new to the Lord. It's all in the Bible, and he can help you with it, and it's always bad. Then the Lord burned with anger against Israel, and he turned them over to King Cushan-Rishathaim of Aram Naharaim. And the Israelites served Cushan-Rishathaim for 8 years. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, the Lord raised up a rescuer to save them. His name was Othniel, the son of Caleb's younger brother, Kenaz. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he became Israel's judge. John T playing with his Lego this morning in another room. Phew, yeah, he doesn't want to know about the Asherah poles. So there was a peace in the land for 40 years. Then Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. Othniel, we read a bit about him at the end of Joshua yesterday. Ehud becomes Israel's judge. Once again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight, and the Lord gave King Eglon of Moab control over Israel because of their evil. Eglon enlisted the Ammonites and Amalekites as allies, and then he went out and defeated Israel, taking possession of Jericho, the city of palms. And the Israelites served Eglon of Moab for 18 years. This is actually really depressing after the glory chapters at the end of Joshua, where people get their land and they swear they're going to follow the Lord. And look what happens here. The new generation that they didn't teach very well has come up. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, the Lord again raised up a rescuer to save them. His name was Ehud, son of Gera, a left-handed man of the tribe of Benjamin. I'm left-handed. The Israelites sent Ehud to deliver their tribute money to King Eglon of Moab. So Ehud made a double-edged dagger that was about a foot long, and he strapped it to his right thigh, keeping it hidden under his clothing. He brought the tribute money to Eglon, who was very fat. Park and Admin, can you put the King James Version of verse 17, please? Because from what I remember, it's quite a funny way of saying who was very fat. After delivering the payment, Ehud started home with those who have helped carry the tribute. As an aside, you know when we read that amazing chapter that you're not allowed to leave poo around in the camp because the Lord walks around? I looked that up in the KJV after, And instead of saying going to relieve yourselves and basically do that, it said, if you are ever tempted to go abroad. Yep. Right, that's me lost. Verse 18. After delivering the payment, Ehud started home with those who had helped carry the tribute. Verse 17, the KJV. Oh, who was a very fat man. That's not what I thought it was. Disappointed. Verse 19. But when Ehud reached the stone idols near Gilgal, he turned back. He came to Eglon and said, I have a secret message for you. So the king commanded his servants, be quiet, and he sent them all out of the room. Ehud walked over to Eglon, who was sitting alone in a cool upstairs room, and Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. As King Eglon rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, pulled out the dagger strapped to his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. The dagger went in so deep that the handle disappeared beneath the king's fat. So Ehud did not pull out the dagger, and the king's bowels emptied. Then Ehud closed and locked the doors of the room and escaped down the latrine. It's fascinating that the creation of the whole cosmos takes just 3 chapters in the Bible, and then the rest of Genesis from then on is about nitty-gritty church life. It's like, what matters more to the Lord? 3 chapters given to the creation of everything, and then the rest of the Bible is about his bride and what complete nutters they are, but he loves them and rescues them. After Ehud was gone, the king's servants returned and found the doors to the upstairs room locked. They thought he might be using the latrine in the room, so they waited. But when the king didn't come out after a very long delay, they became concerned and got a key. And when they opened the doors, they found their master dead on the floor. I think the KJV AV there says they waited to the point of embarrassment. While the servants were waiting, I just read that. Verse 28, Verse 26, while the servants were waiting, Ehud escaped, passing the stone idols on his way to Seirah. When he arrived in the hill country of Ephraim, Ehud sounded a call to arms. Then he led a band of Israelites down from the hills. Follow me, he said, for the Lord has given you victory over Moab, your enemy. So they followed him, and the Israelites took control of the shallow crossings of the Jordan River across from Moab, preventing anyone from crossing. They attacked the Moabites and killed about 10,000 of their strongest and most able-bodied warriors. Not one of them escaped. So Moab was concerned by Israel that day, and their peace was in the land for 80 years. There was peace in the land for 80 years. Shamgar becomes Israel's judge after Ehud, Shamgar, son of Anath, rescued Israel. He once killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. Just if you wanted to know that, that's what he did. End of chapter. We're at the halfway point. Please take a break, 30 seconds, grab a drink, chicken goujons, ham sandwich, jam sandwich. I'll just check my phone. Okay. Here comes an absolute beast. Judges chapter 4. Deborah becomes Israel's judge. After Ehud's death, the Israelites again did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord turned them over to King Jabin of Hazor, a Canaanite king. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Sisera, who had 900 iron chariots, ruthlessly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help. Deborah, the wife of Lapidoth, was a prophet who was judging Israel at that time. She would sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would go to her for judgment. On the day she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh in the land of Naphtali, she said to him, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor. And I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors to the Kishon River. There I will give you victory over him." Barak told her, "I will go, but only if you go with me." "Very well," she replied, "I will go with you. But you will receive no honor in this venture, for the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman." So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. Blackham, Judge Deborah, what a legend, one of the great church leaders of all church history. Yeah, well, we in this gang have actually fallen in love with the daughters of Zelophehad. I venture to say maybe even more than with Deborah. Now Heber, the Kenite, a descendant of Moses's, no argument from me, a descendant from Moses' in-law Hobab, had moved away from the other members of his tribe and pitched his tent by the oak of Zainanim near Kadesh. When Sisera was told that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, he called for all 900 of his iron chariots and all of his warriors, and they marched from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Get ready. This is the day the Lord will give you victory over Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you." Remember where he's coming from? Gilgal. Yep, up he comes again, the one who delivered them from Egypt. So Barak led his 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into panic. Sisera leaped down from his chariot and escaped on foot. What are we learning about Jesus? Then Barak chased the chariots and the enemy army all the way from Harosheth Hagoyim, killing all of Sisera's warriors. Not a single one was left alive. Meanwhile, Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because Heber's family was on friendly terms with King Jabin of Hazor. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come into my tent, sir. Come in. Don't be afraid." So he went into her tent and she covered him with a blanket. "Please give me some water," he said. "I'm thirsty." So she gave him some milk from a leather bag and covered him. That's lovely. I'm sure nothing else happens. That's the end of the chapter. That's a really nice thing to do. Next chapter. Oh, verse 20. "Stand at the door of the tent," he told her. "If anyone comes and asks you if there is anyone here, say no." But when Sisera fell asleep from exhaustion, Jael quietly crept up to him with a hammer and tent peg in her hand. Then she drove the tent peg through his temple and into the ground, so he died. When Barak came looking for Sisera, Jael went out to meet him. She said, "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." So he followed her into the tent and found Sisera lying there dead, with the tent peg through his temple. So on that day, Israel saw God defeat Jabin, the Canaanite king. And from that time on, Israel became stronger and stronger against King Jabin until they finally destroyed him, which is what they should have done in Joshua anyway. JL proves both that milk is good to get you to sleep at night and also that every church needs Christ-centered women. Yep. Milk is good to get you to sleep at night. Classic. Judges chapter 5. The Song of Deborah. Park End musicians who are in the crowd tonight, maybe we could set this to music. The Song of Deborah. On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. Israel's leaders took charge and people gladly followed. Praise the Lord. Listen, you kings. Pay attention, you mighty rulers, for I will sing to the Lord. I will make music to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you set out from Seir and marched across the fields of Edom, the earth trembled and the cloudy skies poured down rain. The mountains quaked in the presence of the Lord, the God of Mount Sinai, in the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, and in the days of Jael, people avoided the main roads. Hey, it's like today. And travelers stayed on winding paths. Yes, there were a few people left in the villages of Israel until Deborah arose as a mother for Israel. That's one of the best sayings in the Bible, isn't it? When Israel chose new gods, war erupted at the city gates. Yet not a shield or spear could be seen among 40,000 warriors in Israel. My heart is with the commanders of Israel, with those who volunteered for war. Praise the Lord. Consider this, you who ride on fine donkeys, you who sit on fancy saddle blankets, and you who walk along the road. Listen to the village musicians gathered at the watering holes. They recount the righteous victories of the Lord and the victories of his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord marched down to the city gates. Wake up, Deborah, wake up and sing a song. Arise, Barak, lead your captives away, son of Abinoam. Down from Tabor marched the few against the nobles. The people of the Lord marched down against mighty warriors. They came down from Ephraim, a land that once belonged to the Amalekites. They followed you, Benjamin, with your troops. From Machir, Machir, Bible our favorite. The commanders marched down. From Zebulun came those who carry a commander's staff. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah and Barak. They followed Barak, rushing into the valley. But in the tribe of Reuben, there was great indecision. Why did you sit at home among the sheepfolds to hear the shepherds' whistles for their flocks? Yes, in the tribe of Reuben, there was great indecision. Gilead remained east of the Jordan. And why did Dan stay at home? Asher sat, and moved at the seashore, remaining in his harbors. But Zebulun risked his life, as did Naphtali on the heights of the battlefield. The kings of Canaan came and fought at Tanakh near Megiddo Springs, but they carried off no silver treasures. The stars fought from heaven. The stars in their orbits fought against Sisera. The Kishon River swept them away, that ancient torrent. The Kishon, march on with courage, my soul. Then the horses' hooves hammered the ground, the galloping of Sisera's mighty steeds. Let the people of Meroz be cursed, said the angel of the Lord. It's not a Hillsong song, is it? It's a little bit different. You're seeing a slightly different side to the living God. He's not your boyfriend. Let him be utterly cursed, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty warriors. Most blessed among women is Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. May she be blessed above all women who live in tents. Sisera asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a bowl fit for nobles, she brought him yogurt. Then, with her left hand, she reached for her tent peg, with her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera with the hammer, crushing his head. With a shattering blow, she pierced his temples. He sank. He fell. He lay still at her feet. And where he sank, there he died. From the window, Sisera's mother looked out. Through the window, she watched for his return, saying, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why don't we hear the sound of chariot wheels?" Her wise women answered, and she repeats these words to herself. They must be dividing the captured plunder, with a woman or two for every man. There will be colourful robes for Sisera and colourful embroidered robes for me. Yes, the plunder will include colourful robes embroidered on both sides. Lord, may all your enemies die like Sisera. But may those who love you rise like the sun in all its power. Then there was peace in the land for 40 years. What was your Wednesday prayer meeting like? We are into the third. Take 30 seconds there as we head into Judges chapter 6. So far, the women have kept church in check. The Bible loves strong women as long as they are focused on Jesus. I haven't looked into it, but I do sometimes wonder that mother of Israel, mother in Israel term, if there's some sort of, if it wants us to be thinking of Mary, the mother of the Israel. Sisera's mum and harem, they seem such losers. Judges, chapter 6. Gideon becomes Israel's judge. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. Glory, yes, the mother of church, the mother sin Israel. The mothers in Israel. I mean, there's got to be, isn't it? Yeah. So the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, caves, and strongholds, which is exactly what was said in pretty much Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, that they'll just be a nightmare to follow false gods who aren't Jesus. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops far away as Gaza. They left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. These enemy hordes, coming with their livestock and tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived on droves of camels too numerous to count, and they stayed until the land was stripped bare. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. And do you remember that passage in Deuteronomy? You will eat until you're so full and satisfied, and don't forget to thank the Lord after. Now look at them. When they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites. He said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt. I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppressed you. I drove out your enemies and gave you their land. I told you, I am the Lord your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live. But you have not listened to me." Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." Jesus is never far away from wine and wine presses. Have you noticed that? In the Old Testament and the New. There's awesome significance there. Why do the writers always say that Jesus is around wine presses? Why, when they were spying out the land, do they bring grapes back hanging between two cursed people on a plank of wood? Verse 13, "Sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say, 'The Lord brought us up out of Egypt'? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you." "But Lord," Gideon replied, "how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family." The Lord said to him, "I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man." Gideon replied, "If you are truly going to help me, show me a sign to prove that it is really the Lord speaking to me. Don't go away until I come back and bring my offering to you." He answered, "I will stay here until you return." Yeesh. Gideon hurried home. He cooked a young goat, and with a basket of flour, he baked some bread without yeast. Then, carrying the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, he brought them out and presented them to the angel who was under the great tree. The angel of God said to him, "Place the meat and the unleavened bread on this rock and pour the broth over it." And Gideon did as he was told. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and bread with the tip of the staff in his hand, and fire flamed up from the rock and consumed all that he had brought. And the angel of the Lord disappeared. Jesus had to wait ages while Gideon was making his broth, isn't it? You know where he's got that staff from as well, don't you? He has got that from the ark under his seat. He's got that from that box. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he cried out, "Oh, sovereign Lord, I'm doomed. I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." Yes. "Oh, sovereign Lord, I have seen the Lord face to face." "It's all right," the Lord replied. "Do not be afraid. You will not die." And Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and named it Yahweh Shalom, which means the Lord is peace. How can people read the Old Testament and not worship Jesus and think he just comes 2/3 of the way through the text just to finish off the match? The altar remains in Ophrah and the land of the clan of Abiezer to this day. That night the Lord said to Gideon, take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that is 7 years old, pull down your father's altar to Baal, and cut down the Asherah pole standing beside it. If you want to know about Asherah poles, turn back about 45 minutes. Watershed rules apply. Then build an altar to the Lord your God here on this hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully. Sacrifice the bull as a burnt offering to the altar, using as fuel the wood of the Asherah pole you cut down. That's what you do with false gods, with idols and with addictions. Burn it in service of Jesus. 18 plus Asherah poles, yeah. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had commanded. But he did it at night because he was afraid of the other members of his father's household and the people of the town. Early the next morning, as the people of the town began to stir, someone discovered that the altar of Baal had been broken down and that the Asherah pole beside it had been cut down. In their place, a new altar had been built, and on it were the remains of the bull that had been sacrificed. The people said to each other, "Who did this?" And after asking around and making a careful search, they learned that it was Gideon, the son of Joash. "Bring out your son," the men of the town demanded Joash. "He must die for destroying the altar of Baal and cutting down our giant phallic god." But Joash shouted to the mob that confronted him, "Why are you defending Baal? Will you argue his case? Whoever pleads his case will be put to death by morning. If Baal truly is a god, let him defend himself and destroy the one who broke down his altar." From then on, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, which means "let Baal defend himself," because he broke down Baal's altar. Bible Hour group, if you do pull down idols in church life for the sake of Jesus, you will still find opposition today, even maybe from family members. But learn from this book how amazing it is and worth doing. Gideon asks for a sign. Soon afterward, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east formed an alliance against Israel and crossed the Jordan, camping in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. He blew a ram's horn as a call to arms, and the men of the clan of Abiezer came to him. He also sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, summoning their warriors, and all of them responded. Yes, idols are treasured by every culture, and when we smash them, people get very, very upset. And the Asherah pole culture is back with a vengeance. Then Gideon said to God, "If you are truly going to use me to rescue Israel, as you have promised, prove it to me in this way. I will put a wool fleece on the threshing floor tonight. If the fleece is wet with dew in the morning, but the ground is dry, then I will know that you are going to help me rescue Israel as you promised." And that is just what happened. When Gideon got up early the next morning, he squeezed the fleece and wrung out a whole bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Please don't be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Let me use the fleece for one more test. This time, let the fleece remain dry while the ground around it is wet with dew." So that night, God did as Gideon asked. The fleece was dry in the morning, but the ground was covered with dew. Always reminds me of Abraham sort of bartering with the Lord about sparing Sodom and Gomorrah, and you have that list of the amount of times he asks. Judges chapter 7. Gideon defeats the Midianites. Ooh, an example. Liz and I went to a Julie Bindel event to campaign against the sex industry. And we had to get through hordes of pro-porn protesters and pro-sex work campaigners. Yeah. And yeah, it's bizarre because it's so damaging and people know it and it can be proved how damaging it is. I've got no idea who Julie Bindel is, but I get the point. Gideon defeats the Midianites. So Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and his army got up early and went as far as the spring of Harod. The armies of Midian were camped north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they have saved themselves by their own strength. Therefore, tell the people, whoever is timid or afraid may leave this mountain and go home." So 22,000 of them went home, leaving only 10,000 who were willing to fight. But the Lord said to Gideon, "There are still too many. Bring them down to the spring, and I will test them to determine who will go with you and who will not." When Gideon took his warriors down to the river, the Lord told him, "Divide the men into two groups. The one group put all those who put all those who cup water in their hands and lap it up with their tongues like dogs. In the other group, put all those who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream. Only 300 of the men drank from their hands. All the others got down on their knees and drank with their mouths in the stream." The Lord told Gideon, "With these 300 men I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home." So Gideon collected the provisions and ram's horns of the other warriors and sent them home, and he kept the 300 men with them. Did you know that Tozer used to read the Bible on his knees, like those men were drinking water? He even read Shakespeare on his knees because he thought it was so inspired. Julie Bindel is a journalist who has written extensively about rape, sexual license, etc., etc. Ew. Verse 9. That night the Lord said, "Get up, go down into the Midianite camp, for I have given you victory over them." There it is again. I've done it. Jericho, done it. Amalekites, done it. Midianites, done it. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah. Listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you will be greatly encouraged. Then you will be eager to attack. So Gideon took Purah and went down to the edge of the enemy camp. The armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east had settled in the valley like a swarm of locusts. Their camels were like grains of sand on the seashore, too many to count. Gideon crept up just as a man was telling his companion about a dream. The man said, "I had this dream, and in my dream, a loaf of barley bread came tumbling down into the Midian camp. It hit a tent, turned it over, and knocked it flat." His companion answered, "Your dream can only mean one thing. God has given Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite victory over Midian and all its allies." Of course, that's the only thing that could have meant. Well, when God's at work, yes. When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship before the Lord. Then he returned to the Israelite camp and shouted, "Get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes." He divided the 300 men into 3 groups and gave each man's a ram's horn and a clay jar with a torch in it. She narrowly escaped Peter Sutcliffe. Then he said to them, "Keep your eyes on me. When I come to the edge of the camp, do just as I do. And as soon as I and those with me blow the ram's horns, blow your horns too, and all around the entire camp, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." It was just after midnight, after the changing of the guard, when Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the Midianite camp. Suddenly, they blew the ram's horns and broke their clay jars. Then all three groups blew their horns and broke their jars. They held their blazing torches in their left hands and their horns in their right hands. And they all shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Because the Lord always shares his victories with church. Always. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. What an eye-opening hour about the angel of the Lord, also called God in this book, and his bride. The patience he has had, the guidance he gives, and the depravity we can so quickly fall into from one generation to the next. Pull down those Asherah poles and burn them for Jesus. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thanks be to God. Amen. God willing, we will meet back here at 9 p.m. tomorrow, where we will carry on the book of the Judges. For all other little snippets and updates, check our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Also, check the weekly newsletter that we're circulating around the Park End Church family. You're welcome, Peter Davey. You're welcome, Paul Blackman. You're welcome, Sue Roberts. We will see you soon.